Walk down Oxford Street and you'll see something that doesn't quite add up. Huge American candy stores, prime retail space, eye-watering rents, often not many customers, and yet for years they kept multiplying. So what's really going on here? Are these shops just selling overpriced sweets to tourists? Or are some of them part of something much darker? Tax evasion, counterfeit goods, even money laundering? Because this isn't just an internet conspiracy anymore. Westminster City Council, HMRC, and the National Crime Agency have all been drawn into the story. And the facts are strange enough on their own. In this video, we're breaking down the evidence for and against the theory that some of Britain's American candy shops are fronts for something else. The suspicion started with a simple question. How can these shops possibly make sense? Oxford Street is some of the most expensive retail real estate in the country. After the pandemic, dozens of American-style candy and souvenir shops suddenly appeared in locations once occupied by major brands. Westminster said at one point it was investigating around 30 shops on Oxford Street over alleged business rates evasion, with arrears reaching roughly £7.9 million. The council also said many of the businesses did not appear commercially viable. That's what made the shops look suspicious to so many Londoners. The theory wasn't just, this is tacky. It was, how does a low-footfall sweet shop survive in one of the priciest shopping districts in Europe? And once people started asking that, they began looking more closely at what the shops were actually doing. Here's the strongest case for why people think some of these stores are not normal retail businesses. Unpaid business rates. Westminster repeatedly said these stores owed millions in unpaid business rates, and later council papers described the problem as involving patsy directors and phoenixing, where a company shuts down and then reopens under a new name to avoid liabilities. A 2023 Westminster scrutiny paper explicitly said the council had been working with HMRC and the NCA to investigate the financial practices behind the candy stores. That matters, because if a business is constantly dissolving and reappearing, it becomes much harder to collect taxes or identify who is really behind it. Counterfeit and unsafe goods. This wasn't just a tax story. Westminster Trading Standards seized large quantities of suspected counterfeit and unsafe products from these shops. By 2024, council reporting said enforcement action had helped reduce the number of candy stores on Oxford Street from 30 to 21 and seize around £1 million in illegal goods. Earlier raids had already recovered fake branded chocolate and other suspect stock. That doesn't prove money laundering by itself, but it does show that at minimum, some shops were tied to unlawful retail practices. Opaque ownership structures. Westminster's own documents and FT reporting pointed to shell company-style arrangements, nested tenancies and directors who were hard to trace. The council's dirty money charter said the level of interest in American candy alone seemed unlikely to explain so many stores in such a small area, especially alongside millions in arrears and repeated seizures of illegal goods. That kind of opacity is one reason people jump from dodgy to front, a concrete example that looked absurd. In 2025, a tourist reported being charged £899 for 2 packets of sweets at an Oxford Street candy store. That complaint led to a raid in which officials reportedly found a hidden room containing around £80,000 worth of suspected fake and unsafe goods, including sweets, cigarettes, vapes, nicotine products, and electronics. Reporting on the case also said staff attempted to flee through a concealed exit. Again, one case doesn't prove an entire industry is a laundering network. But stories like that are why the conspiracy spread so fast. They feel less like quirky retail and more like organized evasion. The broader law enforcement context, The NCA has warned more generally that cash-intensive businesses can be used as fronts for money laundering, and in 2025, its Operation Machinize targeted hundreds of high street premises, such as barbershops, because such businesses can be used to clean criminal cash. That broader context matters. It doesn't name candy shops specifically, but it explains why law enforcement agencies take strange, cash-heavy or opaque retail businesses seriously. Now, for the other side, because if we're being fair, looks suspicious is not the same thing as proven criminal front. Some of these shops may simply be bad but legal businesses. Even Westminster and press coverage have drawn a distinction between some legitimate stores and others under investigation. The Guardian reported that while some stores were legitimate, others were being investigated for tax evasion and counterfeit goods. That's important. It means you can't just point at every American candy shop and declare it criminal. Tourist demand is real. American snacks are novelty products in the UK. A single imported chocolate bar or cereal box can be sold at a huge markup. Westminster itself highlighted cases where cheap chocolate was allegedly repackaged and sold for £9 to £10 a bar, showing how high margins can exist in this market. In other words, a shop does not need to be laundering money to charge ridiculous prices. It might just be exploiting tourist demand and weak consumer awareness. Oxford Street's post-pandemic collapse created weird incentives. The pandemic hit Oxford Street hard. Major stores closed, vacancy rates rose, and landlords had to fill spaces somehow. Reporting from the FT and other outlets described how the combination of COVID disruption, vacant units, high rates, and lax company registration rules created ideal conditions for low-quality, short-term retail to spread. So there is a non-conspiratorial explanation too: a broken high street ecosystem. No sweeping court finding has proved the whole sector was a laundering operation. This is the biggest point against over-claiming. There is strong evidence of rates evasion, phoenixing, counterfeit goods and opaque ownership around some of these stores. But I did not find a court ruling or official statement proving that the entire wave of American candy shops was one centrally coordinated money laundering conspiracy. The public evidence is stronger on tax abuse and fraudulent retail practices than on proving every shop was laundering criminal proceeds. So the honest version is not the conspiracy is proven. It's closer to there was enough real wrongdoing that the conspiracy stopped sounding crazy. This is where the story gets more interesting, because several sources suggest that the main racket may not always have been classic Hollywood-style money laundering. It may have been something both duller and easier to scale: business rates evasion and phoenixing. A National Audit Office report on tax evasion in high street and online retail warned that Phoenix activity remains a serious enforcement problem, and later reporting said HMRC's estimate of tax losses from phoenixing had risen sharply. Westminster's scrutiny documents describe almost the exact same pattern around candy stores. Companies dissolve, reopen under new names, and liabilities become difficult to recover. That means the candy shop conspiracy may actually be several overlapping problems. Some stores selling legitimate imported sweets at absurd markups, some stores linked to counterfeit or unsafe goods, some using shell structures and phoenixing to dodge taxes, and possibly, in some cases, businesses attractive to money launderers because they are cash-heavy or opaque. That version is messier than the meme, but it's probably closer to the truth. The reason this story exploded is simple. It feels visible. Most money laundering stories are hidden in spreadsheets, shell companies, and offshore structures. But these shops were right there on one of the most famous streets in Britain. Bright, loud, half-empty, selling tiny bags of sweets for absurd prices. They became a symbol of something bigger. A sense that parts of Britain's high streets don't work the way they seem to. and that enforcement often arrives years late. Westminster leaned into that wider message too. Its public documents linked the candy store issue to a broader fight against dirty money in London, while national agencies were increasingly warning about shell companies, fraud, and criminal use of high street businesses. So, even if the meme was oversimplified, it tapped into a real fear. That the shopfront economy people see every day can hide a very different financial reality behind the counter. So, are Britain's American candy shops really fronts for something else? The best evidence says this. Some absolutely were tied to serious misconduct. Unpaid business rates, counterfeit goods, opaque ownership, and phoenixing are all documented. Westminster worked with HMRC and the NCA for a reason. But that still doesn't prove every candy shop was a money laundering front. In some cases, the more boring explanation may be the correct one. Exploit tourists, sell junk at huge markups, avoid tax, shut down, reopen, repeat. And honestly, that may be just as revealing. Because whether the model was laundering, tax abuse, or both, the real scandal is that on one of Britain's most famous shopping streets, it took years for the system to catch up. And that leaves one final question. If this could happen in plain sight on Oxford Street, where else is it happening? Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Your feedback helps shape what topics we cover next. And if you'd like to support the channel while sipping something warm, check out our shop at restoresips.etsy.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.